You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we are discussing Fixed Frequencies, track 2 on 2005's Potemkin City Limits LP. First, we are going to kick this episode off with a cover and conversation with Andy Treister. Anyone who remembers our Middle Finger Response episode may remember the jazz cover and interview with Andy we included. If you haven't heard that cover, you can find it in the Middle Finger Response episode. I put a call on Instagram for a cover of Fixed Frequencies. Andy replied, and he sent one of the most unbelievably mind-blowing covers I could have ever hoped for to hear of this song. So we're going to kick it off with a chat with Andy and then his cover. Then we're going to hear a conversation I had with Josh Kemble, who is notably the vocalist of the punk band Dogwood, but has since become an executive chef in San Diego and also is the host of The Family Cast. Josh's podcast is really fantastic, and he's had friends of the podcast Ryan Onan and JP Peters on his show. You might remember that JP Peters is the engineer on Failed States and Victory Lap and was our Negretto guest, but he also was in a Tooth and Nail Records band called The Undecided in the 90s, who were label mates with Dogwood. So I pulled this conversation with Josh out of a 2-hour conversation I had where we also discussed Who Will Help Me Bake This Bread, People's History of the World, and Tartuffe. So that 4-song discussion will be a standalone episode on the podcast. But this section on Fixed Frequencies was too good to bury it in that episode alone, so I've included that section in its entirety here. So I am really pumped about this episode. I really hope you love the conversations, and I really hope you love Andy Treister's cover. So let's kick it off with Andy Treister. Andy Treister, welcome back to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Andy, it's a delight. It's like basically the 1-year anniversary since you were here for the Middle Finger Response episode. I remember recording with you just about this time last year, and then we had to redo it because we had problems. But I will never forget that sort of jazzy cover you did for Middle Finger Response. And I'm excited to have you back again to discuss another project. But how has your year been since we convened this time last year?
It's been good. It's been life in the COVID United States as it is.
Yeah.
I've been working a lot. I've been trying to, make some music in the meantime. I will say, usually I, save all the hyperbole about propaganda and what you guys are doing for the end. But since you asked, I will say that having the constant flow of information from you guys and all the reinforcement, I have made some pretty significant changes for the better in my own life. In the sense that, I was a vegetarian from when I was 18, and I've since, over the past year, I've gone completely vegan. So
nice.
Good about that. And I'm now almost entirely a bike commuter, which I have to attribute to the Hadron Collision episode.
Love it.
So yeah, except when I work night shifts, but otherwise, yeah, I'm biking a lot.
Fabulous.
So feeling good.
Love it. Well, Andy, recently I put on Instagram a little story that said, hey, does anybody want to do a cover of the song Fixed Frequencies from Potemkin City Limits? And you replied that you would like to do one. You did it very quickly, and the cover is extremely good. And I listened to it like 4 times in a row about an hour ago. And I was literally laughing as I was listening to some of the parts because it was so good. So there are my glowing words of affection for what you have created here. And we'll listen to it in a second, but I'm wondering what it was that made you decide to take on this challenge that I randomly put out there on Instagram.
I mean, I don't want to be like the guy that just makes propaganda covers and stuff, but this song particularly, like it has so much dynamics to it, and it has so much feel to it that for the style of stuff that I like to do in the music that I make, with doing a lot of the like layered harmonies and things like that, I felt like there were a lot of areas to explore, and we can kind of talk about the song in more detail in a bit here, but like there's a lot that you can do with the vocal tricks and all these complex layers to kind of bring out the feeling of what they were getting at, especially towards the second half of the song. And so, you know, I'm not like a singer at all. I'm pretty
I disagree.
shrill. Oh, that's nice of you to say. But yeah, one of the ways that I kind of hide my lack of having an inherently cool voice is just by putting a bunch of harmonies and layers on it, and then people don't really notice that I sound like a like cat screeching in a tin can. But yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
Well, Andy, I love it. And before we talk about it, I want to play it for the listeners. So here is your cover. How long did you work on this? Like, it was very quick turnaround. You only worked on it for a couple days.
Yeah, I think today's what, Wednesday? Today's Thursday. I started arranging it on Monday. I did the guitars on Tuesday. I did the vocals yesterday, and then I mixed it this morning. So
amazing. Well, let's hear it. Let's hear Andy Treister doing Fixed Frequencies.
Profess noble intent as we civilize human impediment. Your hands are clean, the noblesse so please. Wipe the scrupulous off of your faces and conceal our design separated by nothing more than place and time. Different scenes and crimes. Pray that he who's without to cast the first statues up. Former rose to folk heroes. Your forefathers hung. Lecture me about plundered soil while you loaf upon your father's spoils. We want nothing more. What you already have, comforting sad and exculpatory facts. Made of an empty land, conquest so complete, we could pull these tanks right off our streets. And listen, number two, bureaucrats have become just like you, lounging carefree in cafes absolved of sin.
Okay, so that was super awesome. Andy, I want to hear the story of like the process you went through in order to adapt this. Tell me a little bit about the steps that you went through the last couple of days.
I mean, first thing I did is I pulled up the tab book, you probably have the same one. But and I was kind of looking at just like what he was playing. And a lot of it's pretty basic. Like the whole song, aside from the thrash part, is just like very diatonic in E minor, just follows the E minor scale basically. So I was just kind of getting the progression under my hand and finding chord voicings that sounded cool. And then I was listening back and forth, and there's a lot of layers and stuff. Like even just what Chris is playing, he's got all those like swells and things like that. So I was trying to kind of incorporate all of the moving pieces into one acoustic guitar line, and then incorporating a lot of what Todd does too, because Todd does some really cool stuff. Some of it I didn't even notice until after I had recorded it, and I was just listening back to it. That really changes the chords themselves. So anyway, so I was playing around with what it felt like they were doing, and I have the program Guitar Pro. It's the same program that they use when they send out the tabs, and so you can basically type out guitar parts and keyboard parts and things like that and play them back. And so that's usually how I construct vocal harmonies. Is I'll put the guitar part down, and then I'll write like the main melody that Chris is singing, and then find harmonies either above or below it that sound cool, and what's in my range and all that. So I can kind of play around with it without having to record a million takes. And yeah, so that's kind of what I did, just to kind of plan it out and look for parts that sounded cool. Just listening to it over and over again and looking for the dynamics and the parts that I wanted to emphasize and all that.
When I was listening to it, the first thing I thought of was like if Ben Bridwell from Band of Horses played a Propagandhi song. I am a massive fan of the first two Band of Horses records. Everything after that, I don't really care about a whole heck of a lot, but man, those first two are so good to me. So I was like immediately captivated by the approach that you took vocally. And so I want to hear the story of putting these vocal tracks down, because you took a really interesting approach that threw me when you first started singing. And I was like, holy smokes, I was not expecting this. So tell me a little bit about the vocal process and some of the choices that you made when you were approaching this.
That's nice of you to compare me to a human, let alone a human that's actually successful. A lot of what I was doing is like, I'd have my guitar here and I would just, I don't know if you can even hear what I'm doing, but like I would find like Chris's vocal line, like I would see what he was singing, and then look for the harmonies that fit that well. So moving up in the scale by a third or down in the scale by a third or a fifth, just to kind of create chords with my voice, and tracking it out on paper first for the most part. And then as I got towards the end, I was getting lazier and just kind of doing it on the fly. But you find these harmony lines and you just sing them like a regular line, but they fit under the regular lines that Chris is singing.
There's some wild guitar work in this that you've put together, and there's the middle part under the both profess and hands are clean parts are really wild. Like you're really going to town and going hard on those sections. So I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about anything that was unique or interesting about the performance wise that you kind of like enjoyed, or were like thinking like, oh, that was interesting while you were playing it. Cause some of these guitar parts are really amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that was what I wanted to do, is, make it very identifiable that that's what they're playing, even if I'm going to put it on an acoustic guitar. On the recording itself, you can kind of tell the difference in the first half versus the second half of that thrash part, because Jord is like going along on the snare, and then like the second half comes around and he just like goes into like boom, dun, 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 dun. Like the texture just changes so much. So I felt like I had to do the same thing on guitar. So I mean, like what I did, the first line is actually really easy. It's just kind of this flamenco thing. It's just you can't see my fingers at all, but like I'm gonna get my mic cable out of the way. But it's just like, so I mean, all you're doing, your finger is just staying in the same place, just doing these little hammer-ons.
Yeah.
And then for the second half, I basically play what they're playing, only just kind of rocking out, because like no matter what style you want to do this song in, you have to play that part headbanging. Like
Yeah.
I jump to that F chord, which they don't do, but I think it kind of accents the feel of the riff.
Listening to the way that you performed it, I was thinking about how doing a cover like this and the amount of work that you put into it. I'm wondering if that made you connect with this song, which is now like 17 years old. I'm wondering if it made you connect with the song in a new way that maybe you hadn't before in the last, 15, 17 years.
Yeah, I'm probably in a couple of ways. I mean, this like, if you asked me to list my favorite Propaganda songs, I probably wouldn't come up with Fixed Frequencies that quickly, but it's like this album came out when I was 18. Like I vividly remember lying on my dorm room bed, like reading through the lyric book and listening to it for the first time. And so like, I've probably listened to this song in the car and sang along to it 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there's so many cool things, like especially that second half after it comes out of the thrash part and it goes into that last verse, and then the long outro that's like a minute and a half of kind of all this building. There's so much that's going on there, and so fun to sing along to and air drum to and all that. And so a lot of the like vocal things that I did, I feel like were things that I was singing along in the car with them, for years and years and years. So it's fun to dig into these songs that are a little bit less popular among or get talked about less frequently.
And I know that when you were figuring this out, you were trying to unravel a little bit of mystery around some of the vocals that are performed, and I know that you reached out to Chris, and I'm wondering if you had anything to share regarding your digging and your investigations.
Yeah, so at your suggestion, there's a few lines that he sings over in the background of the verses, and so yeah, I reached out to him on Patreon, and I was like, hey, I'm doing a cover for Greg's podcast. I was hoping if you remember what you sang in this part. And he actually didn't get back to me until, let's see, it looks like 11:01 a.m. today, so 2 hours ago. So I'd already recorded it and everything.
Yeah.
But this is what he said. He goes, listening now, trying to figure out, this is what I got so far. So for the first verse, he says, desert blooms, platitudes, mourn thee, which that was pretty close to what I had. In the second verse, he says, question mark, destiny, question mark, manifest, and then question mark, he doesn't know. And then in the third verse, he says, drunk with blood, devour flesh, which I got, building facts, which I almost got, and then settler, question mark, he's not sure about that one. And then he says, I should have written this crap down to some of that time, right? And he thanked me for doing a cover. That is so cool, right?
That is amazing. Did you send it to him?
I haven't sent it to him yet. Maybe what I'll do is I had my little GoPro going while I was doing some takes. So maybe I'll put together a video and send him a YouTube. It seems easier.
Amazing. I am excited because I loved the playthrough video that you did of Middle Finger Response last year. So if you do wind up doing a video playthrough of this and putting together any footage in the coming days, just let me know and I'll blast it out on social media and everything.
Cool.
That is a hilarious exchange of messages. I should have written this crap down. That's the best part. Okay, so now that we've talked about your cover and your exchange with Chris, I'm wondering your thoughts on the musical performance by the band on the record itself. Do you have any thoughts or ideas about any of these specific details and performances that the band did on the record?
Yeah, so looking through the tab book, I only have the guitar version. I don't know if they made a bass and drums version for this one, but the choice of chords and stuff that Chris uses aren't that outrageous for most of it. A lot of it, it's pretty straightforward, major and minor chords, and then he kind of has that refrain of like the that kind of thing. He does that a
Yeah.
lot. Which that little arpeggio is really cool because it uses the like the Lydian voices of C, which uses the flat fifth and sounds a little bit more nuanced than what you would hear in a lot of like popular music. So that's one little cool harmonic thing that he does. The other thing that is really cool about that is if you're looking through the tab and then you go back and listen to it, you can see that he's doing those little swells on his guitar throughout like the whole thing. Like you hear it in the little breaks, but really he's playing it like sometimes he's matching the vocal melody, and it's just like a really cool extra bonus thing that I feel like they weren't doing very much of at that period. And certainly, with Beav and Sue Lin, they do a lot more of that, like with the EBow and stuff, but this is kind of like a precursor to that, which is cool. I think there's a few notable bass parts. So like Todd's little bass solo in the bridge, like it's so simple, but it just stands out so much. And you can't like not sing along with it.
Yeah.
And then Todd's bass line, like even though the guitar chords are mostly pretty standard, he kind of comes up with his own little harmony bass line. So sometimes instead of just playing the root note of each chord that Chris is playing, he's actually like walking up a little melody that harmonizes with it. And the coolest part of that is in the verses and the second half of each verse, where Chris plays an E minor chord. Todd, it sounds like is playing a high A under it, which like is so hip in like the jazz world. Like it's it kind of creates like a four or a sus4 sound, which now we're going to go way down to this rabbit hole, but one of the things that makes like Chris's playing so unique among distorted guitar bands is his use of sus chords. Like the things that make Last Will and Testament and Humane Meat and Dear Coach's Corner sound really unique is the use of these chords that basically substitute a major or minor third, which spells out them being a major or minor chord, into these more bland tones, the second or the fourth or something like that, that keeps it much more harmonically neutral. And there's a lot of reasons that I think loud bands don't do that, mostly because it sounds muddy, but somehow when Propaganda does it, it just sounds cool. And it's like, it's the same kind of stuff that you're hearing in these really cool, like pop and fusion bands like Snarky Puppy and stuff.
Snarky Puppy.
Oh, I love them. But this is just one example of when they do it, but another, like, all these songs are just so unique the way that they do it. George stuff that I wrote down, that little intro fill, like right as it's coming in, like, so cool. And then otherwise, like, it's just a pretty simple drum line, but you can tell that it's Jord playing. Like, the way he accents, there's some really cool fills in there. I wrote a bunch of them down, but I don't think I need to bore you with every single drum fill that I think is cool.
I mean, feel free, because go and do as much minutia as you want to while you're here,
Yeah. Okay. There's one. So towards the end, if you're listening to it, like the nothing more than space and time kind of part, that was flat. He's doing a lot of matching the rhythm of the vocals on his fills while he's keeping the beat going, similar to what he does in Mate Ka. And it's just like, it's so Jord.
Yeah. I remember we talked a lot about that on our Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes episode as well, where like the choices that he makes always seem to be speaking so much to the vocal line as well. And like, to me, the fact that Chris and Jord have been friends for so many decades at this point, like, I feel like that's why they're capable of doing that.
Oh yeah. The other thing, speaking of how they communicate to each other and all that, is looking through the tab book and like trying to play along with it. Like, I had to actually write this down on a separate sheet of paper, because the like in that last part, the like, we want nothing more and all that, like, it'll play 2 measures of E minor and then C for 7 measures. And then the next time it plays C for 6.5 measures. And then the next time it plays 7 measures. And the next time it plays 6 measures. And it's just like, so simply there to match the vocals that Chris has laid out. Like, it's just so crazy that, you know, they didn't just write down a progression and play it. Like,
Yeah.
it's really there to serve the lyrics, and
It serves the story. Exactly.
It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, do you know of other bands that do that?
Not like that. I mean, like, there's bands like Dream Theater and Protest the Hero that do it for sport, but like,
Yeah.
not like this. Like, it's just, I mean, and imagine trying to teach that to Jordan Todd and saying like, okay, this time we're going to play 2 beats less, and this time we're going to play 2 beats more, like each time around. And he's playing these arpeggios that are using a pattern of 3 notes. So it's like all this math. It's so cool. And then they played it live too. Like,
yeah. You can find videos that I found a couple of them. They were playing in 2007 with Beeve, which I saw them play this. Like, the first time I ever saw them play it, they did.
Interesting, because the first time I saw them was 2005 when they were touring for this, like a couple months after it came out. And I remember they opened with Speculative Fiction and Fixed Frequencies. And then I was hoping they were going to play Fidelis Hearst right after it. So I definitely saw them play it twice, but I don't know if I ever saw them play it with Beeve. I'm pretty sure every set list, or every time I've seen them, I've written down the set list right after. So I'll have to go through my old notes and stuff. It doesn't sound like a hard song, but like stuff like that just makes it hard to learn.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you kind of went through that process, because you've been able to explain it in a way that Keith and I would have never really figured out, like the differences in the way that there's like, you know, two bars less or whatever. And like explaining it in that way is really helpful for the listeners too. Do you have any thoughts on the lyrics themselves? Like, do you have any ideas floating around that you like felt like sharing about how you feel about this one?
I mean, it's very, well, there's a lot of like allusions to like biblical things, which is really cool. And I think the song is about, you know, the Israel-Palestine conflict, which of course I would know nothing about if I hadn't had the DVD from the live album that came with it and has a documentary on it, which was probably right around, I don't know, it's a couple of years after this, I guess. But yeah, so let me pull up the lyrics here. I just had them. I mean, it seems like they're drawing a lot of similarities between Israel in Palestine and the colonization happening there to what their own history is, which is, you know, common thread among propaganda lyrics. And so there's a lot of times where they're talking about like this happened, or this was just what happened to us too, or from us, I guess. Even just when it gets very simple and it comes out with "we want nothing more," it's like such a cool, powerful line.
I love it. So, Andy, tell me a little bit about annoying your family while you were making this cover.
Yeah, we're remodeling our basement, or we're at least trying to. And so I've had to move my office up into my bedroom. And so my wife's office is in the guest room next door. And she was on calls all day yesterday while I was in our closet, basically belting these out, because you can't sing this song quietly, even if it's an acoustic cover. So she didn't say anything, but when I said, "Could you hear me in there?" She was like, "Oh yeah."
Well, shout out to your life partner for tolerating you for a couple of days while you create content for this extremely niche podcast that exists on the internet. I love your adaptations, your Middle Finger Response cover and Fixed Frequencies. These are, you know, off the beaten path selections to cover, and they've contributed something really special to the show. So thank you so much for coming back and making this cover, putting in that work, learning about this, getting in touch with Chris to unravel those mysteries, and also for the conversation to come on and explain what makes this song musically so interesting. It's really been a pleasure, man.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me again. I'm always happy to contribute when I can.
Hiya, Keith. This is Tom calling in from London, England. Just wanted to leave a few words just regarding the song Fixed Frequencies. So, things I love about this song, I love the impact of the initial chords that comes in. I love the harmonies they use. I love Chris's vocals, clean, powerful, steady rocking beat. It's absolutely the perfect track 2 for the album. Keep up the good work.
Well, so Josh, there's the theme that we're referring to is a lot of tied to your own personal history. And,
if your hands are clean, when the vessel bleeds, what will be themselves of you?
And I think that jumps really nicely to our next song. We're going to jump from 1996 to 2005 to Potemkin City Limits, and we're going to talk about Fixed Frequencies. Now, I have to caveat this because this is a song along with Fadala's Hearse from this record that feels like something that is entirely forgotten by this podcast to date. We've never talked about Fixed Frequencies on this podcast. People have been asking for it since day one, and we just flat out haven't done it. This song, Fadala's Hearse, Fixed Frequencies, Fadala's Hearse, and Haile Selassie are 3 songs that I just haven't really engaged with on this show that much. And I'm thrilled you picked this one because it forces me to address it and to talk about it. But one of the reasons that I've never really talked about this one or Haile Selassie to date is because I've talked about religion so much on my other podcast, Classical Ideas, that I've been doing for like 5 years. And I've, done episodes on Israel. I've done episodes on Palestine. I've interviewed Palestinians who live in diaspora on that podcast. I've interviewed people who are proclaimed Zionists on that podcast. And anytime that you address a topic like Israel and Palestine and the biblical Judea and Samaria and stuff like that, if you miss any detail, I feel like you're setting yourself up for a whataboutism, endless stream of comments to where it feels like there's no way that you can comprehensively do a song like this, Fixed Frequencies or Haile Selassie, without endlessly hearing about what you missed. So I think that is the reason why I have shied away from doing those particular songs. And this is why I was so happy that you picked it, because you kind of forced my hand to acknowledge that Fixed Frequencies exists and that it totally rules. So let's talk about the music first. So tell me your thoughts on the musical composition and the performance of this song, because it's very, very special, very unique. There's so much vocal layering that goes on. And I'm just wondering your thoughts and general musical assessment of this tune.
Music first is like, the song is an absolute banger, even though it's not a fast, like fist in the air kind of kill you circle pit song.
It's a surprising song to follow.
Is it?
It's a surprising one to follow speculative fiction, like, because it slows down that speculative fiction, like that fast, predictable pace that you're come to know and expect from like a record opener. But then this one just like hits the brakes a little bit, and it's a surprising second song.
You're right. I think, and it's equally to me as powerful in another way with the music, because it's got that drum beat that I love. It's a very driving foot beat.
It's a Dear Coach's Corner style.
Dear Coach's Corner. I mean, other bands have done this beat also that I love. I just love it. I love it still has that punk power that you come to expect from a punk rock song. Excuse me. And again, it's that music, the mother music speaking. To me, this one has all the powerful drums throughout. Of course, he's a powerful drummer. But he's also, it's beautiful musically on the guitar too. To me, I could, I could have gone for a little bit more bass in the mix on this song, because it has a groove, and it really, so the rhythm section of a band could really perform on this song just with the tempo and the beat that they have. not complaining about it. It's just I would have loved to hear more of it.
Right.
But the it has the musical has got like a couple of breakdowns that he does really well on the guitar, where he's just kind of picking some strings while he's still singing. And again, like he's so talented on his musicianship. Of course, the harmonies being some of the music, also the harmonies, the way the harmonies react to each other with the vocals are also in harmony with the musicianship. If that makes sense. So there's like the vocals and the guitar and the bass are all creating this harmony together, this melody, this like almost like dissonant melody, the way he's doing them. And this song musically, I love the just that breakdown of what you've come to expect from Propaganda. It's like, this is not ska punk, this is not snotty skate punk, this is not, again, double time beats, this is not the Fat Record sound or Epitaph Records or G7. Like, it's like they almost invented a new sound with this song.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like they figure out a way to play the guitar a little bit slower with beautiful chords, these like weird minor ninths and stuff like that, and then like also but a powerful drum beat behind the whole thing.
There's not a song like this on today's Empire's Tomorrow's Ashes, really.
No. I mean, this is I could picture this song being in like movie soundtracks or having like an R&B singer singing it. Like it's such a well-written, well-constructed song. And if anyone from the band is listening, this is just like such an inspirational musical piece. Just the music alone, even like I said, the way it's written, and I can tell through the chord structure and song structure that I don't know if I'd be able to play it. And then of course it also has a breakdown with these octave slides towards the end, like how much more groove can you add to one song?
Yeah. And it really is sad to me that this record was so overlooked when it came out by fans of the band, because to me, this song and Cut Into the Earth from Potemkin City Limits are two of my favorite Propaganda musical compositions that exist in the entire discography. Like, I think that this record, like especially Cut Into the Earth and this song Fixed Frequencies, are two of the most unique musical pieces that they've ever done. Like, if they were just available as instrumental tracks, they would still be interesting.
No, you're totally right. If this was fully instrumental, it would still be one of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
The reason that I picked this song is because this is one of the songs that the music is like one of the vocals, and the vocals are like part of the music. It's like, this is such a cohesive song. This is such a cohesive song. And I haven't even started talking about the lyrical content.
We're going to get there, I promise.
No, I mean, I'm saying like this could be, I can't talk about how well written this song is, and it's inspired me to write songs like this. And it's got the all pummel vibe, like the broken, got that kind of tempo where I could picture like Stephen Edgerton playing guitar in this. Or I know that they did this at Blasting Room.
No, they didn't. Not this one.
But the guys mixed it and did it, right?
Yeah. Jason Livermore mixed this one.
It
was an emergency mix. The story on that is on Patreon.
Yeah,
it's so
that's
funny.
right. That's right. I just automatically when I see Bill and Jason's name on there, I'm like, oh, cool. It went to blah blah. But I know that Bill is a melody man. He's obviously good at drums and songwriting, but he's got these like weird melody ideas too. And I could picture Stefan also playing. So like I said, it's such a well-written song that I could picture other people doing this song.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. That to me, that's a good song.
I love it. Well, and I love that you specifically honed in on the drums immediately at the start of your point, because to me, Potemkin City Limits has maybe my favorite drum recording. I think that the snare drum sound on Potemkin City Limits is my favorite. It, like, whenever I listen to it in my car extremely loudly, I cannot get enough of the drums on this record. So I'm glad that you went there immediately, because I like, whenever I think about drums, I'm like, I think that Potemkin's my favorite drum sound. I don't know. Okay, so let's get into the lyrics here.
Yeah.
So this one I've got some thoughts on. So we've got this opening line: "Here in the land that Abraham was promised to receive, we listen to you catechize from your pulpit overseas." So We've got this opening reference to
Yeah.
to Genesis 12, right? Where
Right.
it says, "Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you." So we've got this opening reference right to the Bible, smack dab in your face. Tell me a little bit about the biblical reference here in this opening line.
Yeah, this has always been a point of contention for myself, for family members, for other people in the church when I talk about this, because it's like in Genesis, in that verse where it's Abraham, he's talking about Abraham, and I'm wondering if Chris is like totally like raised in some kind of church system that I was, but like that God is basically telling Abraham to do manifest destiny. Wow, God is saying, "Hey, here's some land, take it." You know what I mean? You have some land. Don't worry about that land that you have. Go to that land, and that's yours, and your generations to come will all be there. And that's why it's so messed up, because everyone's fighting over this thing that they thought that was theirs, you know. And then so we took that message and spread it across, empires and, English and everywhere that basically people thought they were the chosen ones to take over this new land. And henceforth, here we are, it comes to America in the 16 1700s, and it's just kind of still happening today with like open space land is not, we can't have land anymore, it has to be condominiums or something, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
it goes from Genesis to today, and because God said to Abraham, go get some land, it's cool.
So then we have this catechize term, which I think is super important. So catechism, teaching catechism is like talking about the tenets of a religion, right?
Yes.
So
it's usually to youth.
Yeah. So it's
typically
like synonymous with preaching, right? So we've got it. We've got this church reference to the way that the story of Abraham's family having this promise from God is then taught in every church across the world, right? So many of these like pulpits are that where the catechism is delivered are from churches that are extraordinarily far away from this specific spot on the world that we're talking about, which leads to people having a very, very narrow view of what the history of that spot actually is, because most people will never actually go there and experience it for themselves.
True.
Tell me a little bit about, the catechism of the Holy Land from like an American point of view.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, even to go back to the title of the song, fixed frequencies in the singular form in radio communications, fixed frequency is something that's immovable and changeable.
Yeah.
Like that's a fixed station is like nothing's going to change. Nothing's,
wow.
You know what I mean? Nothing is, you're not going to change anything about this frequency. You can add to it or on different frequencies or different channels, but this fixed frequency is the go-to, the standard, the bedrock of this radio communication satellite or whatever the case may be, a station. So it's pretty interesting that he chose fixed frequencies, because he doesn't necessarily say anything about radio communications in the song, but he's talking about. So the catechisms is, like I said, it's usually, at least on the Catholic standpoint, I guess the Calvary Chapel and the other denominations, they don't always use words like catechisms. They don't use a lot of the words that the Catholic Church would use or the Pope would use,
Right.
But catechisms is something that you teach younger people coming up in the church, so they can learn all the tenets and the rules about how to be in the church and how to be that person, right? And then if you're teaching like in a youth group setting, the story of Abraham would be like probably an early teaching. Like that's because it's Genesis, and Abraham had a son Isaac and all this stuff. Like there's all these stories that are coming from Genesis because it's the foundation of the Bible, the foundation of the Torah and the Christian, all the different beliefs and religions that came from these stories. And then when he says settler, we both speak a settler's cant.
Yes,
it's not CAN apostrophe T. That's CANT, no apostrophe, which is a hypocritical statement. I mean, the cant is like a sanctimonious statement that a Christian person might use. And if it's a settler's cant, that to me, that's like the Pilgrims talking to the Native Americans.
Yes.
Or Israel and Palestine fighting with each other. Like, hey, God said this is my land. Well, God told me this is my land. So who's right? Who's wrong? God told us say different things. That sounds crazy. Or conquest of the Roman Empire based on, Constantine's rule or whatever the case may be. I mean, I could have those two different empires wrong. I'm sorry, but I'm talking about like spreading a message in the name of holiness, killing whoever it takes to get there.
Yeah. Well, and then we've got this other line too, like you mourn the proofs of our barbarities.
Yeah, that.
And it's like, so we you can be in the United States and you can be a person who believes in, you could be on like the left, the far left, and you could be heavily critical of certain countries around the world, while also sitting here and benefiting tremendously from the conquests of your ancestors. So I know that it's different to say, okay, this is the world that I've inherited. This is the context in which I live. But without acknowledging all of the ways that you benefit from past conquests, critiquing conquest now has an ahistorical awareness to it. So you, in order to, you obviously should critique conquest today, but like understanding your place within the history of conquest, I feel like is very important as well.
Oh yeah. It's like basically like I wasn't brought here, I was born, or like white guilt, kind of like it's like I didn't own slaves. It's like,
right.
I know. I just listen to me, and like it just all comes down to like listening to the other person. As settlers or as colonialists or anything like that, or even moving westward expansion, or I mean, I hate to say this, but the San Diego Padres are named after Padres who are, people who came over here to proselytize and basically like murdered Native Americans.
Like Junipero Serra. Yeah, exactly.
We got a high school named after him. We got everything in San Diego is based on the missions. And what did the missionaries do down here was, you don't want to follow our religion, we're going to cut your hands off. We're going to blah, blah. And our whole damn baseball team is named after that, and we kind of make it a joke. We got the Fat Friar and all this stuff. It's like, okay, I mean, I'm a baseball fan, but that just sucks that we did that. It's like Cleveland Indians or something like that. It's like that bad or worse.
Interesting.
It's like something like that. So if they change their name to something else, and the Redskins and the stuff's like, but we won't, because it's not offensive technically to some. Right. I mean, but then if you look at it, wow, what did we do?
You have to have a really nuanced view of the history of the term San Diego Padres in order to, jump onto the side of like, this is a team that has a name that is worthy of being changed, because that flips everything when you think about that,
People don't like when I say that. People in San Diego don't like when I say that.
I'm sure they don't.
But that's what it's named after. That's what we're doing. And we came over here with conquest in the name of, Catholicism or Christianity or whatever, because the Spanish came down through Mexico and up through, blah. It was the missions. All the missions in California are based on taking away the religiosity of the Native Americans.
Yeah. So we've got this next line here. It's kind of a long one, but so I'm sorry if I, for reading it all the way through, but it says we both read from the same old played out scripts and hum familiar tunes, broadcast on fixed frequencies, stuck in locking grooves. We both profess noble intent as we civilize human impediments. So if your hands are clean, then noblesse oblige, that you wipe, that you, who me, look off of your face and concede our designs separated by nothing more than place and time. So we've got this French term, noblesse oblige, that translates to nobility's obligation, which I think is really interesting. Acting with honor or generosity or whatever towards like the people of lower social class and etc. And so it's like in the context of the lyric, it's like an apology for assuming. But I'm wondering about your thoughts on this passage here, because it's very dense, and this lyric is one that's going to take me a long time to unpack in the coming months. Right.
Well, as it should. Like, it's a very it's another thing about, like I was saying, about the guilt of your calling, if you will, or your like your moral obligation, your noblesse oblige to. You have the means by which to do so, and you're not doing anything about it. Like, even it can be as simple as voting. Some people aren't allowed to vote, even in America. Some
Yeah.
people are not allowed to vote in other countries. It's your moral obligation to do that for them, or it's your moral obligation to help feed the poor, because that's what the Bible, or the God you worship, tells you to do. It's your moral obligation to spread the gospel by any means necessary, by killing or cutting off hands or anything like that. I mean, that's extreme, but that's what happened. He does say the fixed frequencies, and they're locked in the groove. It's like, it sounds to me like at that part, Chris, or the pen writer, the author, or he's talking about two other people, is like people who maybe grew up believing this, singing these hymns in church. You're locked into the groove of, like, not like a vinyl groove, but like you're in there, you're singing, you're singing about words that you don't even like understand or know about or anything like that as a kid, because you're like, oh yeah, we're just reading from this book. It's written by some white dude in the 1600s or even earlier, and we're still singing it. Even the song, even a famous song like Amazing Grace, was written by a white person on a slave ship to America. Hearing the sounds, the humming of the slaves underneath, and he turned it into a song that we still now sing to this day as like a Christian anthem. And then I'm not even going to get into the Star Spangled Banner, but not today. But these fixed frequencies, so like Amazing Grace, Star Spangled Banner, those would be fixed frequencies, because like everyone knows them. You're forced to sing those as a kid, almost at like the Pledge of Allegiance and a lot of stuff as a kid, which I always kind of turn my back on. It's like, I don't pledge to the flag. Like even as a young church kid, I knew that that's not where I didn't feel right about that. It's so weird, that whole thing. But we're taught these things, these catechisms. It's like these, if you believe in this, then here's and you could go as simple as saying it's the 10 Commandments. You can go as complex as saying, like, bringing it down into Greek or Aramaic and really studying that. But the song, he's trying to say all this stuff in like, less than 3 minutes. Less than 4 minutes on this one. But like, he's trying to say all these things, again, with the part that I don't understand about the lyrics, I'll just say, is when the backups are like banana all the time, because I'm trying at first, when you first hear it, that's the first thing I heard. But then I could shut that off in my mind and really hear what the lyrics are saying. They're just basically saying, God told these people to go take this land. But now everyone's fighting over it because, like I said, God told them both that it was okay.
Yeah.
Who's right, who's wrong? Whoever has the most power.
Yeah. Well, and then there's a comply resist sort of lyric, the noble intent to be civilized human impediments, and seeing humans as a barrier to achieving something that you believe you have the God ordained and given right to accomplish. Human beings as impediments is a really striking visual when you think about how many people have just been mowed down and
get them out of the way,
plowed under. So then we have this
buried, if you will.
Totally. And then we have this next line, which has another biblical reference. And I went on BibleGateway.com and I looked up that let he who is without sin cast the first stone. So I found this next line: different scenes, same crimes. Pray, let him who's without sin cast the first. And so I pulled it from Gospel of John chapter 8. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, he that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone at her. And so this is an interesting line. And then it's like the first statues of the former rogues turned folk heroes that your forefathers hung. So we have this reference to the Bible again, and talking about former rogues turned folk heroes, which is one of the most recognizable lyrics in the song, most likely to a lot of listeners, because of the way that the lyrics are brought forward in the mix and kind of emphasized on that quiet musical moment. So let me know what you think about these lyrics. Sure. Yeah. Former rogues being folk heroes. That could be back in the day when almost like, I wasn't around, but I don't know how the voting system worked for voting for someone like Abraham Lincoln or slave owners like Thomas Jefferson, the fathers of our country, quote unquote, the people on Mount Rushmore, who are every single person on there. You could make a critique about any one of them about being a bad person also, but those are our folk heroes. Those are like the people we sing songs about, or the people we learn about in those history books written by those Europeans.
stuff like that. Or even putting up a statue of Robert E. Lee down in the South and fighting to take that down or anything like that. It's like, how do we epitomize? I mean, going back to even a throwback to what we were just talking about, making a statue of the Father Junipero Serra in San Diego. It's like, why would we put that up?
Yeah.
Wow. Yes, he founded our, he made our city and missions and all that stuff, but at what cost? Former wrote, so how did your desert bloom? It's like
Yeah.
ending the song in this question, and he's laying out the word bloom for so long. It's like, to me, it's a very sad line. It's like, what did it take to make this beautiful? San Diego is America's finest city. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Got all the stuff that you could want in a city. But how did we get there? You know what I mean? Like, how come this, like, how did we get this city? And then, or even I could even break it into the Mexican American War. It's like, this was not ours.
Right.
But and the biblical story about the let he who is without sin cast the first stone has become into context with in so many other stories and stuff like that. It's because, like, yeah, all these Pharisees and everyone is saying, like, kill the person who's doing wrong, or kill the person who's not agreeing with you, or I don't agree with your political standpoint, so we're enemies. We're mortal enemies because you blasphemed my beliefs or whatever. That's in that story in particular. It's like Jesus is like, well, if you're a better person than she is, go ahead, kill her, do it, you do it, and then nobody did. And then he's like, see, what I tell you, if you can be a better person than that, then go for it. And but you know that you're not. So if you ever had the chance to sit down with one of your mortal enemies and say, we're enemies because of this, and if you can prove me wrong, then go ahead and kill me. But they'd be like, but in the movie, of course, there'd be the super crazy enemy who would just shoot you or whatever. But if you're a real human, or if you have humanity, you probably, and if you had all your marbles together in your head, you probably wouldn't kill somebody based on your beliefs, no matter how much you argue on Twitter or Instagram about, who's the best person running for president or whatever, or which denomination. Like, how do we have so many denominations of church? And anyways, if you're only supposed to be worshiping Jesus or God or all three or whatever, it's like, why are there so many denominations? Why isn't there one?
Right.
No one's going to give me that answer.
Yeah.
Because they're wrong.
and you referenced that how did your desert bloom line, but we also have to talk about the term entre nous, which leads into that, which between is us. French. Yeah. Between us. So between us, how did that desert bloom that you live in there over there? Why is Tel Aviv so stinking beautiful? You know what I mean? Uh-huh. And it's like this, Chris is like, hey, wink, wink, give me the real story behind how you got something this beautiful. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, we know how you managed to pull this off. Mm-hmm. And then something else that really sticks out to me is, I was thinking about a film that the journalist Thomas Friedman from the New York Times made called, what was it called? It's called Straddling the Fence. He made this film in about 2005, and it's about the fences that separate Israel from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And it's about the walls, the barriers that run across the entire country. And people are like, it's like a scar ripping through the heart of Judea and Samaria, the biblical heart of the country. Mm-hmm. And how Friedman throughout the film interviews people who are saying things like, how about we all just have an equal vote here? How about we have a one state solution and we all just have one person, one vote. And we actually live the principles of a liberal democracy. And how that would, how the re-enfranchisement of disenfranchised people could have such a massive effect on the way that everything is going. So it's like in this line here, it's like, while you like lounging carefree in your cafe is absolved from sin and human grenades, how it's like, well, what if we re-enfranchised a lot of people and turn this into an actual liberal democracy where there's actual votes being counted? Mm-hmm. So that is a really fascinating thing, to where you talked about voter disenfranchisement earlier. And I'm like, what if like that wound up shaking out one day, where like this Holy Land becomes a one-state solution, and there's a reenfranchisement of the currently 5+ million disenfranchised people who are in the region, what would that wind up shaking out? And these are the questions that I ask myself whenever I think about a song like this. What would happen if there was a reenfranchisement? Does that make sense?
Oh, it does make sense, and I cannot picture it, to be honest. It's like, why, in that sense, why wouldn't we just give land back to Mexico, or like what? I mean, I'm familiar with border walls, and like what is stopping countries from just saying? I mean, it happened, I guess, not too long ago with like, South Sudan, or like, different Czech Republic. Like there's ways to do it. People can do it. Like you can move borders. Like people, it's just it's power and it's money and it's humans. It's like, we're not going to budge. We're going to fire missiles into your city. We're not going to budge. We're going to just keep calling you racist names and dogs. And you're like, God told us, like, this is our land. You know what I mean? It's like, so it's so sad and disheartening that, to me, just to think that what you just said could never happen.
Tell me a little bit more about that, though. Living on that border, I live on a border here with Canada. So Buffalo, whenever I ride my bike down to downtown Buffalo, I can see Canada. It's like 10 minutes away from me. Tell me about that San Diego, Tijuana border. Because like, if you think about, whenever I picture Israel, Palestine, I picture the walls that I've seen from studying the region. Tell me about like what it's like for you, and what like a wall system sort of like looks like and feels like on your end of the country.
Sure. I have a feeling it's different from the Buffalo border wall. It's probably a little bit of a different world.
There's no wall here. None. It's just a river. It's the Niagara River.
What? Why? Why can't we do that? I'm just kidding. Yeah. I mean, there's parts of the border, of Mexico border, where there is not, like this Rio Grande or whatever. There's not like such a wall, and some parts of the border wall are you can pass an arm through. Like you can pass food through, or gifts or whatever. Like on the beach, there's a wall there. But it's just strange because it's literally a boundary between you and another person. It's literally, physically, the manifestation of division. It's literally dividing us, and well, more recently as a political country, but like dividing us from other humans, except for that one point where you can reach across the border park. And there's a lot of people in San Diego who work in San Diego who live down there. They cross the border every day to go. It's like an extra 3 or 4 hours on your day to do so. But living down there is more affordable for some people, and less and more carefree to some degree. There's parts in Tijuana where I have friends that live like on the beach for very, very affordably, and they can see downtown San Diego from there. It's nice. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it is crossing into a third world country right away. You can walk across, drive across, whatever. You can, a lot of times if we fly to one of the major cities in Mexico that are down south, we fly out of Tijuana, you walk across and then fly from there. So it's a little bit different experience than flying from one of the American cities. But it is definitely it's a whole nother country. It's a whole nother world. And it's right here. I can see it from my house. You know, the third worldness of it is kind of, it's very interesting and sad and disheartening at times. It can also be very beautiful and uplifting. It's Tijuana right here on the border is one of the biggest cities, like as far as population, but also just like density and expansiveness. It keeps basically the borders of Tijuana. It seems like they just keep growing. They keep adding borders so they can add more people into the space. Yeah. And they just keep going. They keep growing east, because Tijuana is on the west side of the Pacific Ocean. So it's just expanding more by the millions, adding refugees from other places and stuff like that. So it's kind of, it's very hard to explain to people who have never experienced Mexico or Tijuana or even San Diego, because we have our own cuisine, we have our own fusion. There's a lot of immigrants from other countries that aren't, Mexican or Spanish speaking countries there. So we get a lot of other culinary influences. So I thrive on that. A lot of the San Diego chefs have open spots down there, or brewers or coffee makers. They've opened spots down there because it's such a cross-cultural connection. But it's, like I said, so different at the same time. And the punk rock and metal scene down there are rad.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, what is, give me like kind of like an overall lesson that Fixed Frequencies makes you think about? Like, give me sort of like a takeaway lesson on why this song generally matters to you as somebody who cares about the world and people.
Man, Chris and Chris and Co. I think Potemkin's my favorite album overall.
Mm-hmm.
It's conducive. It's a very cohesive record. They're all good records in their own merit, of course. And Less Talk probably means the most to me in my journey. But Potemkin, City Limits, it's so smart. I think it's such a smart record. Every song is smart, and even the title of the album is just like, what is he's gonna tell us something right here. We're about to learn, and the whole album is a lesson. This song in particular, like why does Chris care so much to teach me about religion? What are you trying to tell me here, Master Chris? Like, why do you keep talking about this? Because religion is not just Jesus died for our sins, Jesus rose on Easter. It's like there's this whole human bloody history that got even before Jesus was around. There's a whole history of Christianity. I love telling people that Jesus was not a Christian. Right. I love telling people that Jesus was an immigrant and illegal, born to an unwed mother by a refugee parent. People don't like that. People don't like hearing that, but it's true. There was no white people in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
There was no white people in the Bible. It's not written for Americans.
The mention of the album title, Potemkin City Limits, is super important here, I feel.
Yeah.
Because if you go to a church in like what could only be described as a basketball arena in parts of the United States, if you turn on HBO and you watch like the TV series Righteous Gemstones, I'm thinking about churches like that, right? So and I know that's a comedy, but churches like that, the physical building structure with like the stadium seating and the sound system and the bands and everything, that all exists. And so to me, that is like a Potemkin city where you have the shiny veneer and then you have the cultural rot underneath, which is motivated and inspired by greed and profit and enriching the exact people that People's History of the World was talking about, from another song.
Yeah.
And to me, Chris is saying that in Israel, it's like a Potemkin city where a lot of people have described parts of Israel as looking exactly like some of the most beautiful parts of Southern California.
Yeah. Right.
And so he's saying that like we have this beautiful shiny veneer of the building facades that Grigory Potemkin was putting up along the Dnieper River. But we have the rot behind it that is just being covered up and, painted over. So to me, that's like, this song is one of the most vivid examples of Potemkin cities on this record, which didn't even include the song Potemkin City Limits on it, So to me, this almost could be like the title track of this record, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. It's my favorite song on the record. I picked it out of, their whole catalog. Obviously you gave me freedom to pick songs, and I wanted to pick this whole album. Like I could have dissected this album because I love it. And like I said, Chris came with the intention to teach on this record, I think. And from a teaching standpoint, from what I know, is like you go in expecting, there's certain things that you already expect the students to know. And there's certain things that you need them to know from each lesson. And there's certain things that you expect them to know after you're done teaching. Right. And at least in the maybe that's not didactic format, but like maybe in a sense that Chris, and he references his other albums a lot too. I should say they reference their other albums a lot. They throw back all the time. They include lyrics from other songs in Potemkin City Limits is, like you said, not even on this record. It's like, he's smart. I think he knows these things. He's prescient. I think Chris could be a professor at teaching these things in college to some degree. Like, because like I said, he's been teaching me since I was before I turned 20, and I reference his lyrics daily, almost like biblically, like it'll come up like a movie quote or something. I'll be like,
Yep.
Hey, how did your desert bloom? Or like, all these other things. And the whole thing about Potemkin City, we got a couple of them here in San Diego. We take our landfills and we cover them up with brand new cities. Like the most beautiful highest point in North County is San Elijo Hills, and that used to be the dump.
Wow.
And it's like they built these rad houses, all this new stuff. It's kind of like off the, it's elite and it's on a dump.
Wow. Dude, if you ever go to Winnipeg, make sure you go to a pilgrimage to Garbage Hill.
Okay. It sounds delicious.
I love it. Well, Josh, what an amazing conversation on fixed frequencies. Thank you so much for chatting with me about that song. That is
so good. It's a good song.
Amazing.
It's a good song, dude. Thanks for having me.
Turn folk heroes, your forefathers home. Don't let